Thank you, Liki. On behalf of the ABS community, I want to express my sincerest gratitude to author of Mexica Gold, our guest speaker, Mr. Ted Estrada. He's joining us today from Pico Rivera, California. A little bit about Mr. Estrada. He was born in San Antonio, Texas, and grew up in Corpus Christi near the Mexican border. He went on to attend the University of Texas as a history major before going on to have a career in healthcare administration. It was while he was attending UT that a group of distinguished anthropologists and ethnohistorians from Mexico were invited by the university as guest lecturers. Mr. Estrada took the opportunity to enroll in several courses that were focused on Mexican history from these lecturers, and that's where his interest in the subject began. Mr. Estrada is married, went on to be married. He had children and eventually retired from the healthcare sector in 2010 to Arizona. His retirement actually allowed him the opportunity to return to his lifelong avocation of studying Mexican history. And he went on to write his first book, Mexica Gold, in 12 months, which really is quite an accomplishment. Currently, the book was published by Random House Grupo Editorial in 2013 and is currently available on Amazon. The English version is available as both a book and on Kindle, but due to the pandemic, the distribution of the Spanish version has been held up, but it is available on Kindle on Amazon as well. It'll eventually be distributed once it's safe to do so. Once the pandemic allows them to distribute the book. So without further ado, I want to welcome Mexica Gold author Ted Estrada, and thank you, Ted, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mario. It's a pleasure to be here. I love Mexico City. I've been there many times, and every time I go there, I either go to bookstores or I go to the Templo Mayor or the museum, and I have great affinity for all things. As you said, I was born in Texas, and the high school I went to had no classes on world history. The only thing I knew about Mexico was that my grandfather had immigrated from there to Texas. And it wasn't until I got to the University of Texas that, like all freshmen, you don't really know what you want to do. And so I took some history courses, and one day I saw an ad that said that some distinguished anthropologists and ethnohistorians from Mexico were coming to lecture at the, in the anthropology department. Among them, Professor Huberto Jimenez Moreno, who is a great Mexican documentary anthropologist, and Beatriz Braniff, who became my great friend and who passed away a couple of years ago. And she's an anthropologist and architect. At the age of 82, did her PhD in architecture from the UNAM. Anyway, so hearing these people speak, I had, as I said, I knew nothing about Mexico. And so I finally, when I graduated from high school, a friend gave me a copy of Bernal Diaz del Castillo's book on the Discovery and Conquest of Mexico, which over the centuries has changed titles, the true history, etc. I didn't read it at the time because I wasn't that interested. My career took a different route. I went into the healthcare field and spent like 45 years as a healthcare worker, a hospital administrator. And, but all the time I never lost interest in the history of Mexico, and what captivated my imagination more than anything was the conquest. What I found to be interesting was that Here was a young man, he 19 years old, Hernan Cortes, arrived in Cuba and lived there for a few years, and at the age of 34, stepped into the surf in Veracruz, and 2 years later, he had decimated the Mexica Empire, which is, some people refer to it as Aztec, but the word Aztec was not used until about 1621 by historians. The people who lived in Tenochtitlan called themselves Mexicas. And so, spurred with that, I kept reading, researching for about 20 years, and all the time raising a family. And I began to form in my mind what I did not find in other books. So I retired from everything in Arizona, and I'd walk around at night, and I'd say, I can write this book. So as Mario said, I just sat down at the computer, and in 12 months and 127,000 words later, Mexica Gold was born. And I wrote to 20 literary agents in New York and got 2 postcards back saying no thanks. And so I published it, self-published on Amazon. And then a few years later, some friends said, well, we'd like to read it, but we can't read English, it has to be in Spanish. So I had it translated, and I sent it to about 5 of the publishing houses in Mexico City, and the only one that responded was Random House Grupo Editorial. My great editor, David Velasquez, and I went to Mexico City and met with him, and the book was published, and just as they were ready to distribute it, coronavirus hit the world, and it's, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of copies are sitting in a musty warehouse somewhere waiting for the virus to go away in order for them to distribute it to bookstores in the Spanish-speaking world. And the advice I have for people is that, as Alan Toffler once said, we're all lumpy with creativity, but writing is a matter of sitting down and doing it, and which is what I did. And I'm now writing another book, which keeps me busy because I'm being locked up. I feel like I'm in prison. I can't leave the house unless you wear a mask, gloves, a shield, and but it's fun. And why I wrote the book is one of the things that Mario had asked me, is that it was a lot of fun. I used magic realism in the book, simply, and someone said, why do you do that? I said, because I can do whatever I want to with magic realism. Someone meets St. Francis of Assisi, and it's different from the Harry Potter books. Miss Rowling, and that's fantasy, that's not magic realism. Mine has it, and so basically, it was a labor of love for me, simply because I waited till I was almost 70 to write this book. And I think that, as Ernest Hemingway said, if you're a writer, you write, and if you're not a writer, you go around offering excuses why you can't write. And so at this moment, I still keep writing. I'll show you, this is the cover of the book in English. Mexica Gold. And this is, they gave me one copy. The rest are locked up somewhere. This is the one in Spanish, which should be, once the virus calms down, they'll be able to distribute it. So, Mario, did I leave anything out? Anything else you want me to add? Mario?
Mario, you're muted.
Oh, is there? No, if you want to go ahead and just tell us a little bit about the book, and then you've selected a little excerpt to read to us.
Yeah. Basically, what intrigued me as a subject was how a young man with no military training had never held a sword in his hand. Even at the age of 19, he was a womanizer. By the way, as an aside, he's known to have married or had relationship with 9 women and fathered all kinds of children, and arrived in Cuba at the age of 19, stayed there for a while, and at the age of 34, with 11 ships, 5 of which were good, the others were not, 500 men, 16 horses, and 2 cannons, sailed for the shores of Mexico, landed in 1519 in Veracruz, marched all the way to Mexico City, fighting along the way, burning villages, and he was to explore and colonize, but his dream was to become rich, and seeing some of the Moctezuma's ambassadors to him with gold bracelets and ankle bracelets and wearing chains of gold, that sparked an interest in, he said, there's gold here. And arriving in Mexico City, Moctezuma showed him a room full of gold, and Cortez went delirious with that. And the next is just fighting and killing, etc. Unfortunately, Moctezuma felt that Cortez and his men were returning gods, Quetzalcoatl, etc. And things got worse. Finally, Moctezuma was killed, and some say by the Spaniards, others say by his own people. And they had a council that elected Cuitláhuac as the new. They didn't call him emperor. The Mexica call him revered speakers, Tlatoani and Nahuatl. And so the battles raged. Cuitláhuac fought and almost defeated Cortez, except that Cortez had brought the Tlaxcalteca Indians from Tlaxcala, who hated the Mexica. And Cuitláhuac died in Otumba, not from arrows or whatever, but from smallpox. And then Cortez made his way to Tlaxcala, and while he was recovering from wounds, he lost 2 fingers of his left hand. Excuse me. And while he was gone, Cuauhtemoc, who was elected the new revered speaker, they filled like 10 canoes full of gold and rowed out to rowing canoes out to the middle of Lake Texcoco, which at the time was very large, and dumped all the gold in a whirlpool in the middle of Lake Texcoco. The whirlpool was called Pantitlán. Now, as an aside, that gold, from what I've read, was that it's probably somewhere around under the second runway at Benito Juarez International Airport. So if you can buy the land around under that runway, you'll find the gold, maybe, you know. And unfortunately, Cortez returned, and what he did was, because of the lake, he built brigantines, and they sailed back to Tenochtitlan, battled, and on August 21st, 1521, finally Cuauhtemoc surrendered, and that was the end of the Mexica Empire. And so all of these goings on, a lot of it is a figment of my imagination, though the names of the participants are real, the battles are real, the dates are real, but I created some people that didn't exist, but they played part of in the novel. And using poetic license, as I say, I move people around, and they said, well, why did you do that? I said, because I wanted to. If I say turn left, they turn left or turn right. So basically, it's a historical novel with the characters interacting, Cortez and all the women he had, the translator Marina, who was considered a traitor, had a couple of sons by Cortez. And basically, the interaction between all the characters, again, is just my doing. And I've had some good reviews. Dr. Beatriz Braniff Cornejo, may she rest in peace, said she cried when she read it. I said, why are you crying? You're an anthropologist. You've been through all this. And, but anyway, that's basically a thumbnail sketch of the book itself. And I hope that in the not too distant future, the Spanish edition is released. And then whenever you, Mario has my email address. When you read it in English or Spanish, I would appreciate hearing from you and what you think of the book. Anything else, Mario?
Yes, I imagine when we read the book, we're going to come across a bunch of it. What would you say was the most interesting event or scene in your book that you discovered while writing?
The video is breaking up a little bit. Would you repeat that?
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything in particular that that you discovered during your research that you included in your book that you found the most interesting or fascinating? That, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to have been put in the book, but just during your during the writing process.
Well, I researched, read books, bought books, much to the chagrin of my wife. Every time I'd come home, I'd bring a big box full of books. And what I found interesting was that the only true participant in the 111 battles that Cortez had was Bernal Diaz del Castillo. And he was with him all the way, from the moment they landed until the Mexica surrendered. And then Cortez, of course, went back to Spain. He was considered, the king didn't really pay attention. King Charles V, all he wanted was the gold. And so Bernal Diaz del Castillo was the governor of Guatemala. And he read a book called The Life of Cortez by Francisco Lopez de Gomara, who was Cortez's chaplain. And when Bernal Diaz read it, he says, this is all bunk. There's a lot of misinformation and lies. So he said, I was there, I know what happened. And so he sat down, and now this is 50 years after all of that had occurred. And he wrote a book and called it The Discovery and Conquest of Mexico. Though over the years, Mexican historians have called it The True History of the Conquest, etc. But his title was The Discovery and Conquest of New Spain. And he wrote the book, sat down and longhand and parchment and wrote it. And anything written about New Spain had to be approved in Madrid by the ministers of the king. He sent the book and it went from one desk to the other. And in it, he pointedly said that what Cortez's chaplain wrote was not true, or at least part of it. And so the book just lay on people's desks, and it wasn't published until 1632. And of course, by that time, Bernal Diaz del Castillo had been dead about 30 years. So basically, that's one of the interesting things. Of course, there were other writers at the time, but none of them was really there while they were fighting on the bridge, running away from Tenochtitlan at night. And so that was probably the pivotal point that I found interesting, because I read both Gomara's book, and I've read several times Bernal Diaz del Castillo, and that gave me an idea of how one person wrote about something that may or may not have happened because he wasn't there, and Bernal Diaz wrote because he was there. Although he also, I can't believe that 50 years after the occurrences, he could remember the spots on horses and things like that. Maybe that's a little poetic license like I took in writing my book. Anything else, Mario?
Yes, I imagine after you've published the book, you'll meet people or come across new information that maybe you wish you might have included, that you hadn't discovered during the writing process. Is there anything that you've come across in the last 7 years that you wish you'd have had the opportunity, or you'd have known that to include that in the book?
The answer is no.
Good answer. A well-researched book. Great. Well, can you, you chose an excerpt from your book. Would you mind reading a little bit for us?
Yeah, I'll, the chapter I've chosen is chapter 13, that where Cuitlahuac chases Cortez. They leave in the middle of the night in torrential rain. Men have gold ingots strapped to their body on horses, And the battle on the causeway to Tacuba was so horrific that most of the gold and most of the men drowned and they lost the gold. And those of you who live in Mexico City probably have heard of the Noche Triste. And there's the tree is, they took me by it, but I don't know where it is. There's still a tree that was where Cortez sat and cried. And his detractor said he wasn't crying because of the battle. He was crying because he lost the gold. That's what he was crying about. So how much time do you want me to spend? The chapter is quite long, but I will, I'll start from the beginning and then take a couple of parts, and then, because otherwise to read the entire 13, chapter 13 would be like 25 minutes.
Okay, sounds
So
good.
I'll encapsulate it as I go along. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. See if the light here is okay. When the few remaining noble elders of the Mexica-speaking council Moctezuma held by Cortez, because he was afraid and in demanded belief that the white invaders were returning God, they deposed him and elected in his stead his 50-year-old brother, Cuitláhuac, as revered speaker, known for being an intrepid, consummate disciplinarian and strategist. Cuitláhuac's most important characteristic was his fearlessness, particularly of the white, for whom he had an abiding hatred. Besides electing him revered speaker, the council insisted that he marry his niece, Moctezuma's daughter, who at the age of 13 had been married twice already. The moment he was elected revered speaker, Cuitláhuac began to organize the army, appointed commanders, put thousands of people to work making bows, arrows, battle axes, and weapons to be used in the war he planned to wage against Cortez. Having the premonition that Cortez, finding himself and his men in a precarious and beleaguered position, would try to leave Tenochtitlan, Cuitláhuac established a network of spies to watch and report every move the whites made. He insisted that his commanders study all possible escape routes from Tenochtitlan that Cortez would take if he fled, placing Mexican archers in every strategic point of the city. To feed the starving population, many of whom had died, Cuitláhuac sent thousands of swift runners. Swift runners were like delivery persons to friendly provinces to barter for maize, chili, beans, assorted vegetables, dried meat, and other products. What was not immediately consumed was stored for the hard times he knew was coming. Cuitláhuac recruited and trained young men for the elite Eagle and Jaguar Knights, most of them noble birth. He drilled them day and night, had them fight mock battles, and gave them their motto, victory or death on behalf of our Mexica nation. Unlike Moctezuma, who during his reign earned the enmity of the provinces around the lakes, arrogant, Cuitláhuac made peace with them, convincing them to join him in fighting the Spaniards. On the night that it was raining, the soldiers in Cortez, loaded with gold, left Mexico City, but not knowing that Cuitláhuac had already placed observers along the causeway, which was approximately 2 miles long. And there was a horrific battle where many of the men that Cortez died, the horses and the men with gold on their strapped to their bodies fell into the lake and drowned. Again, this is where Cortez left the area and went across the bridge, got to under the tree and cried because of, everyone thought he was crying because of the battle, but actually he was crying because the gold had fallen. And this happened on July the 1st, 1520. The battle continued, spun around the lake, got to a tumba where Cuitlahuac began to harass the Spaniards who were hiding. Finally, the Mexica saw Cuitlahuac on the ground and thought he had been killed, but he was unconscious, and they brought him back to Tenochtitlan and found that he had oozing black pus all over his body and bloody deluxe diarrhea and burning fever. One of the physicians said that thousands of Mexica men and women and children were dying daily with the same symptoms, previously unknown in Tenochtitlan. Cuitlahuac finally died. He was cremated, and while Cortez was in Tlaxcala, Cuauhtemoc and took all the gold that they could find to the middle of Lake Texcoco and dumped it into a whirlpool called Pantitlan. Cortez returned, built some brigantines, attacked the city, and finally on August 13, 1521, Cuauhtemoc surrendered Tenochtitlan and bringing to an end the Mexica Empire, which had been founded in 1325. Basically, that's, in chapter 13, I found, of everything I wrote, was the most inspiring because here was no one had really stood up to Cortez. Moctezuma couldn't. And that was the end of the empire. And from then on, Cortez went on to destroy, tore down all the buildings, the Templo Mayor, and built Mexico City on top of them. The National Palace, those of you who have been to the Zócalo, where the cathedral is, there was another temple that's under there, where the Monte de Piedad, all of that, there were canals, they were all filled in, and Cortez prided himself in saying that he'd built a New Mexico. España, but he did call it Mexico City, and that's where it came from. So basically, I believe that it's a sad story, but to me, it was enjoyable because, as I said, in high school, I knew nothing about Mexico, and it took me 25 years of research, etc. And I finally, at 3 o'clock in the morning on 2013, I finished wrote the end. By the way, I did no rewrites. I didn't fill waste baskets full of pages that I'd written. I went straight through. I'd write 10, 12 hours a day. I'd sleep. I lived on light food because I didn't want to take time to cook a lot. And I was very happy and exhausted. When I finished, I slept for 2 days. And that's the story of how Mexica Gold was born.
Thank you very much, Ted. I'm going to share the link for the book if anyone wants to order the English version on Amazon. I've added it to the all chat. So if you want to copy and paste that so that you can order Ted's book, it'd be wonderful. Now we're going to open up the forum to anyone who has a question about the book for Ted.
Hi, Ted. This is Bill Bice. I'm the president of the society, and thank you very much for sharing with us. You sound like the Mozart of literature, because Mozart didn't make any changes in his writings either. That's very interesting. But I congratulate you, and it's interesting. You sounded like you weren't sure if the tree was still there. It is. It's on the corner of Mexico Tacuba and 2 blocks from Avenida Cuitláhuac, interestingly enough. That's where Mariano Escobedo changes to Cuitláhuac. I've been there. There was a fire about 50 years ago, so there's not much but a big stump. But there's a Plaza del Árbol de la Noche Triste, and it's 3 blocks from my daughter's house. So she walks down there. It's a place to reflect. It's a place to reflect. I have one question. Are there online versions of the book? For example, some of us, I like reading in a Kindle because it has a light and I can change the size of the letter when my eyes are tired. Is there an online version of English or Spanish?
I'm not too sure if the English version is on Kindle, but I will check with Amazon. I know that the Spanish version is, because they haven't been able to distribute it, but I'll check. I don't know.
Just curious.
I would appreciate it if, if you send me an email. My email address is very simple. tedestrada@hotmail.com, lowercase. And I will respond because I'll ask them. I'm not too sure. I know that I've sold the fantastic amount of 20 books in a year, but that's okay. I'm more interested in getting it distributed in Mexico because I think there are a lot of books on the history of Mexico in Spanish. And by the way, Mario and Barbara, I purposely didn't add a bibliography or footnotes and all of that, because this is not a history book. It's a historical novel with magic realism. There are books written by many people, Buddy Levy, Hugh Thomas, and others, who have written, 550 pages of which almost 150 are footnotes and quotes, and I wasn't into that. I was whatever I was writing was coming out of my little brain and no place else.
I have one last question, and I'll turn it to everybody else. I know what historical novel is, but what's magic realism? I'm not familiar with that term.
All right. I'll give you an example. In 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, if you've read it, at the end of the book, a person dies and all of a sudden, thousands of ants carry the body away. That's magic realism. Magic realism is making things occur that may not have happened in reality. For example, one of the characters, a Franciscan monk, runs into St. Francis of Assisi and they have a conversation. St. Francis of Assisi had been dead almost 400 years by the time. That's what magic realism.
Okay.
Or going to a castle and talking to a king who was ruling there 200 years before, things like that.
Yeah, if you
Thank
have a
you.
abuelita who tells
Thank
you
you.
stories of when she was growing up, they usually incorporate a lot of magic realism into their stories.
Okay.
So.
Also, a comment that you can reach the Árbol de la Noche Triste on the subway at Popotla Station.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's,
I was when I was in Mexico City a year ago, last February. I had a nice young man, taxi cab driver, little bitty Volkswagen, green Volkswagen, of which there are, I think, 500,000 in Mexico City. I said, "Do you know where the El Árbol de la Noche Triste is?" "Oh yeah, we went by there, and it just looked like been burned or something like that. There's very little left."
that's right.
I expected a
Yeah,
big, little,
his bills had the original one burned, and they have like just a reja around it, and then they have like a spout, but that's all that's left.
yeah.
And it's dead and it's filled with bricks. So they have the site.
I expected to see a
Yeah.
beautiful
No.
tree, like an oak tree, and Cortez sitting under there crying his heart out and all that. But
The magic realism.
anyway, yeah, it was interesting because the young man said, the taxi driver said, I said, "Where's the Noche de Árbol?" He said, "There it is." And all was just it looked like it had been burned or something like that.
It
Yeah,
was struck by
yeah.
lightning.
Oh, that's what it was.
That's what they say.
Can't remember, I think Orozco Iberra or Garcia Valseta, one of those, they have a print in there of the tree itself, which is still pretty much grown and leaf covering and all that. But this one, what a deception.
I'm sharing a picture so you can see.
Oh, great.
Oh, thank you.
That's what it is now, and there's a sign. That's what it is now.
Sure is a big tree.
Wow. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. I went by so fast on the taxi.
Could you put that picture again, please?
Sure. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big.
Yeah.
You,
What type of tree is it?
I think it's a salsa.
That would make.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but I think it's a salsa.
Is there
Salsa.
anyone else who has a question for
Yes, I
Ted?
have a question, if I may.
Yeah.
Ted, you did profound years of study and the like. And in the beginning, you mentioned there were about 111 battles. Really, this is two things. How many, was it really a battle between those of Tlaxcala and the Mexica with the Spaniards participating? And the other question was, how quickly was the smallpox factor becoming the deciding factor in the whole destruction of the Mexica empire?
Let me answer the second part of your question. The second part of your second question first, and then I'll go back to your first question.
Okay.
As Richard Nixon used to say, the smallpox didn't really arrive until it was brought by a black slave that came with Pánfilo de Narváez, who had been sent by Governor Velázquez from Cuba to get rid of Cortez. So the black slave or whatever it was, servant, came, and the Spaniards had immunity because of
Yeah.
raids in Spain or something. But the Mexica, they had no
Nothing.
immunity to it. And they died by the thousands. But it wasn't until Cortez came in 1519, and Pamplona Narvaez didn't show up until about 1521. He went and battled him and put him in a cage, etc. And what was the other part of your question about?
Of in the very beginning, you know, when he started out in Veracruz and started and picked up the Tlaxcalans along the way, were those battles basically between the Mexica and the Tlaxcalans, where the Spaniards were like an extra element of, including fear? You know, they always talk about the horses, because the numbers, of course, are incredibly, how can such a small force conquer?
Well, remember that when Cortez sailed from Cuba, he went first to what is Yucatan. And
Yes.
there he fought the Mayas. Then he came closer and he fought what was left of the Olmecs. And finally got to Veracruz. And coming to, making his way to Mexico City, he came to Tlaxcala and he battled them, but he discovered that they hated the Mexica, because every year they had the Battle of Flowers, that it wasn't to kill, but the Mexica wanted the young nobleman to take them and sacrifice them at the Templo Mayor. So basically, when he went to battle, the big first battle, he had like 70,000 Mexica with him. It was a pretty large city. And the reason the Mexica hit him, they blocked him from going to the coast to get salt, because a Mexican cannot live without salt. I'm sorry, we Mexicans cannot live without salt.
For those that are interested, I just found out the first fire in the tree was way in 1972. I mean, that's that's four. And the second one was 1981, and that left nothing but a trunk. So.
Yeah, and again, the variety is ahuehuete.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah,
I saw that.
Ahuehuete has no, it says, it's too gorgeous a word to be killed by a translator's punctiliousness, but it can be translated as Montezuma's bald cypress.
That's interesting.
That's good.
And there's another story that Cortés continued his way up to Naucalpan, where I live, by the way, but it's on the base of where now the sanctuary of Los Remedios is. There's a place called San Juan Totoltepec, where the Reforma Club, the British club, is. And there's another tree where supposedly either he cried the second time or it's fantasy or legend. There's the Árbol de la Noche Triste of Naucalpan. Just P.S.
Interesting.
Thank you, Sandra. We have.
I have
go ahead, Elise.
Sorry. I have a question. Sorry. Go ahead, Joe, if you want. Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, first of all, Ted, thank you for the great history lesson. And I've always wondered why they called Cortez Malinche. Do you have any idea?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Why was Cortez called Malinche as a nickname?
Okay. Excellent question. Marina, in Spanish, was a young Indian woman who was in the what is today probably Chiapas or something like that. But her name in Nahuatl was Malinali, and in Nahuatl, Malinali means hierba, grass. And so when he brought her with him because she could speak Nahuatl, and a priest who had been shipwrecked there spoke the
Out of the Spanish.
Santo, yeah. And so it was interesting because it would go from Cortez to her to
Things
Aguilar.
got a little twisted, didn't
So
they?
the question is, was he getting the correct answers? So later on, their name went from Malinali to Malitzin, which Tsin at the end of it's a suffix of Nahuatl, which means like revered, and then but the Spaniards bastardized the word, if you will, and called her Malinche, and so Cortez was called Malinche because, quote, he owned Malinali or Marina. Later, she was baptized and took another name. I can't recall right now, but her name was referred to even by Lopez de Gomara as Marina. And she's been written up as Marina Malintzin and Malinali, etc. So that's why they called him Malinche, but it sort of meant that he owned this young woman.
I have a different version. If you look on page 21 or 22 in Diaz Castillo's The Conquest of Mexico, when Cortez came into the square, everyone yelled, Malinche, Malinche, Malinche. Yeah. I think he was called Malinche, not her. That's my thing.
That's true. But again, it wasn't.
It was more the woman than he.
Yeah, books have been written about her, and this author, Laura Esquivel, wrote one called Malinche, gives etymology of the word, but
thank you very much. I really have to go. I'm sorry. I'm waiting for a doctor's call. Wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you. So my question was, I did grow up in Mexico, and obviously I studied Mexican history many, many years ago. Half of it I remember, half of it I have forgotten. But we always were under the impression that when Cortés arrived in Mexico, part of what added to his success in conquering Mexico was that the Mexicas, or everyone who encountered, had never seen a white man, had not seen horses. So they thought at one point that he was an embodiment of a god. Is that true, or is that kind of the urban myth that we've learned here?
No. So the legend was that Quetzalcoatl, who was the important god, had left Mexico, and he was escorted to, I guess what would be Veracruz, and he sailed away, promising to return one day. This probably happened hundreds of years before, but the legend had lived among the Toltecs, etc. So when they told Cortez that these white men with beards riding these animals, which they had never seen, they had seen signs in the sky, comets, etc., hail during the day, and he said, then it's Quetzalcoatl coming back. So when they arrived, first of all, one of the things about Moctezuma, no one knew what he looks like because you couldn't look on his face. if he walked down, were carried, everyone looked down to see him. He ate behind a screen, and so no one knew who he was. He was a very religious man with all the power. He spent most of his time in the temple, sweeping and cleaning. And so when they arrived, he said, "These are gods." That's why he opened the doors for them. And opening that door, he let in their destruction. And it just amazed me that someone finally, Cuitláhuac was the one that said, "These aren't gods, they bleed and die just like us." And that's how, you're right, they thought they were gods, but it proved that they could be killed like anybody else. Pregunta?
Thank
Is
you.
there, is there any estimate of how much the value of the gold that he took the first time he went back to Spain?
Okay, I think Hugh Thomas or Buddy Levy in their books, I can't remember which, and Bernal Diaz del Castillo doesn't mention it. Supposedly, the very first shipment that they found was like 7 tons of gold. And that's a lot of gold.
Yeah, a lot of anything.
But later on, when they were sending them, the French would intercept the ships and take the gold, etc. But there was never, Charles V was desperate because he was fighting the French. The Turks were fighting him. And they spent all that money building these elaborate palaces and all, and he kept he wasn't into the 5 letters that Cortez wrote him. Mainly had a lot of praising himself and what he was doing, and the Emperor Charles V said, "I don't care about that. Where's the gold?" And there was gold, but not in the amount that they felt. And then, of course, losing it, and the Noche Triste put a damper on people in Spain. There's Council of the Indies and all, losing respect. And that's why Cortez died in ignominy and infamy, and died alone in a cold cell in a monastery near Seville.
How many survived of the original 500? How many more or less survived? Stayed in Mexico, went back to Spain, or anything like that?
The ones the 500 who came with him?
Yeah.
More than almost 300 were killed, and or taken prisoners and sacrificed and all that. But once the word spread that gold had been discovered, ships started arriving with more and more people, and so the final battles, the Noche Triste, for example, he had like 1,000 men with him, some of whom had come. But the original, he had 500 men, 16 horses, 2 cannons, and with that he
did.
So I think we have time for one last question. Does anyone have one last question before?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ivan.
Ivan Munoz from Nogales, Arizona. Mr. Ted, it's nice to see you. It's nice seeing everybody here and the people that organize this. Mr. Ted, what is your favorite part of the book? What is the part that you enjoy the most? And if you can share with us, why do you enjoy it? Why do you enjoy it so much?
Ivan, as always, you all propose some difficult questions. The question was, title, is that what you said?
What's your favorite part of the book? What is the part that you enjoyed the most writing?
All of it. I don't tell anybody, but I sort of lived in some of those battles and ran to hide and things like that. It was just, when people write, one of my favorite authors is E.L. Doctorow, who wrote Ragtime. They asked him, he said, why do you write? He said, because I'm in there. I'm one of the characters. And in my case, I could close, to tell you, I used to go to bed, turn off the light, and with my eyes closed in the battle, I could envision hundreds of canoes on the lake and things like that. And that's what I enjoyed most, is creating these scenes and battles and people beating up on each other, etc. To answer your question,
yeah, absolutely. And I think when I've been texting you over the phone and I tell you, you really do transport me, and I imagine when coincidentally what you say, it's what I felt at least when I was reading the book, because I was telling you, I'm reading your book and I'm picturing this young Cortez in front of the Spanish king that was born in Belgium, and then I am transported. So it's coincidentally the reason you like, or the most favorite part that you like about writing, that creative process. At least my experience with it is I did get to feel that. When I read it, I'm transported back then, and I think about this character in front of the king and how you describe each scene or the perspective of each character. It really, it does, you do a great job by doing that, because I experience it. I don't know the other people that are present here, but I did have I did experience the same thing. So appreciate it. Thank you for the answer.
Would you like to be my public relations person?
Well, I have a lot of take on this book, especially because I am my family, and I don't have my father's last name here in the United States, but I'm from Tlaxcala descendant, and my father's last name is Guatepozzo, and then coincidentally my wife is from Belgium, and then you and I have these conversations about the king really being born in Belgium, but then it was in charge of the Spanish kingdom, and we have all these things. So I'm also passionate about this book as well.
Oh. All right, well.
But yeah, we can arrange a small fee, and I can be your publicist.
No, I'm teasing. Let me know when you finish the book, and give me a one paragraph what you think of it. And
sounds good, sir. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Well, that was, I think, a fantastic last question to end this discussion with. It was wonderful. I can't thank you enough, Ted. This was really, and I have to thank Barbara Franco as well for this, for putting us in contact with Ted and insisting. It was great. I learned a lot. As I told you, I grew up, I studied in Mexico, I studied Mexican history. I studied all of this, but seeing it through your eyes and your storytelling was fantastic. So I will definitely be buying my copy of Mexica Gold. I already checked. It can be delivered in a couple of days in English. It's a paper copy. The paperback can be delivered, or you can buy it on Kindle in Spanish. I've already checked. And so we'll put up all the information on the website later for you guys to check. And again, I can't thank you enough for joining us. It was very refreshing to see new faces, and it was great to see faces that we've seen, throughout the weeks, and our friends. And it's a great way for us to keep, in touch and stay together. I'd like to open it if anyone has any questions to us or anything to share about, what we have been doing, about the ABS, about voting. That's, the other big thing that we're helping out folks with. It's absentee voting for these next elections. And anything else, again, please, if you're not a member, please consider helping us out. Your charitable help goes a long way at us helping other Americans that are in need here in Mexico. So please, go to our website, absmex.org, and click on the membership button and join us. So I'd like to open it up to questions.
Just one thing.
Yes.
I think Gwenny and myself would like to invite Ted to be a member of the Mexico City, Texas X's. I'm a BA and MBA, and Gwen Reinhardt is also a BA from University of Texas, and Patty Hogan is a Longhorn as well.
Well, almost.
Hi, Ted.
A Red Raider Longhorn, but.
Oh, that's all right. We'll put some horns on you.
Yeah, thank you.
Change that black cape with an orange cape.
Yeah, that shouldn't be too hard, right?
Yeah.
Are there a lot of Longhorns in Mexico City?
Lots.
Really?
Yeah.
Probably over 250 or 300.
Wow.
And
No, well, there's
nice.
supposed to be over 600, or I think there's a lot more, but not that many active. Active on sort of the regulars, the real like diehards like Robert and I. Yeah, about 10 to 20. But there's about 100, 150 that kind of come pretty regularly to the bigger events. And we had an amazing, remember for the football game, Robert, right? Last October 10th. That was fantastic.
Well, in all of Mexico, Ted, there are probably close to 3,000 Texas X's.
Yes.
In all of Mexico,
Oh,
from north
wow.
to south, east to west.
Well, I once had a
Very good
list
company.
of how many Texas Techers were in Mexico, and there were a whole bunch, but they've never been able to get their act together. About 20 years ago, I tried, but today the only Texas Techers I know are my architect here in Tepoztlan that built my house and my ex-husband, so. That doesn't make much of a club.
Well, there's tons of Americans in Mexico, that we know.
Yes.
Many of them are from Texas, but there's, we always get different numbers and different estimates, but I think close to 2 million Americans here in Mexico. So there's a lot to choose from for all of these clubs.
Well,
Yeah.
while we're on University of Texas, day before yesterday was Ron Nicholas's birthday, so I called him and he asked about every one of you and said hello, and he's so busy. He's got 5 days a week full-time volunteering, but he misses us all, but he's not going to come visit either, so. But we can go visit him in Marble Falls, Texas.
Right.
Right.
I'm at, I can't remember, 2 years ago, I met Tony Garza, who was the ambassador.
Right.
And I went to the embassy, and he was from Brownsville, Texas, and had been a commissioner of something, a railroad
commissioner.
in Texas. And he was very accommodating, charming. And he says, hold on. And I said, any other Texans here? And he said, yeah, hold on. He pushed the button, and all of a sudden here about 12 people come in working at the embassy who were all Texans from Sweetwater and Houston and Dallas. And I said, you brought all the people from Texas. He said, well, those are Longhorns. These are Aggies. I said, keep me away from the Aggies. So they're
Yeah.
and Baylor and things like that. So listen, I want to thank all of you for the wonderful reception. I told my daughter, who I don't know if she's still online or not.
She's right here.
I was a little apprehensive, but I know that Mario has been very helpful. Barbara, of course, was the catalyst for this, putting together this hangout, if you will. Hang up or hang out, I don't know which it is.
No, we've been hanging out. Soon we will hang up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, as I said, my wish is that the virus disappears soon, and everyone, I can go back to my two favorite restaurants, La Hacienda de los Morales and Café Tacuba downtown.
Yes, I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was there, and I stayed at the Hotel Guillon or something. Been there forever, and it's just down on Isabela Católica, just down the street from Tacuba. But anyway, I have to leave. Thank you all very much. Please,
Ted, please
me-
do
send
join
me-
us. Yes.
send me your comments, tedestrada@hotmail.com, and I would appreciate hearing from you. And I will join the Benevolent Society and see.
Wonderful.
Great.
Barbara, get my friends to donate money to the society.
Wonderful.
And
Wonderful.
yeah,
Thank you very
we'll
much.
look forward to having you with the Texas Exes soon, Ted. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Goodbye.
you,
for sharing.
everybody. Have
Thank
a
you
great
very
day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you,
Yes.
Ted. It was wonderful, and we hope to see you again at our future Hangouts, and you can tell us more stories. And in a few weeks, we'll do one, and you can quiz us all on your book to see who read it
Yes.
and who got it all.
And
Good idea.
I do want to let you all know, because this is really exciting news, and Barbara knows a little bit about this, and Robert knows a little bit about this, and a few of you know about this, Mario. The Texas Exes has joined several other alumni associations from outstanding American, English, and Mexican universities with the American Society. I mean, we're independent, but we're kind of taking advantage of the positive influence that could have. And so we'll be putting together events and helping and in fundraising